Madam Speaker, in recent years, it has become glaringly obvious that federal judges are overstepping their constitutional bounds under Article 3 of the Constitution, which applies that lower courts are created under statute by the Congress. Pursuant to congressional action, district judges are limited to the plaintiffs before them that have nexus in their district. Madam Speaker, in short, that means that a district judge needs to be confined to their district and to people who are in their district. Case after case over decades has shown that when they fail to do so, the cases are thrown out. More importantly, if they were to continue to do what is generally called nationwide injunctions, then in fact there would be no need for a 5-4 or 6-3 decision by the High Court. The High Court of 9 must reach a majority in order to make something the law of the land, and yet a single district judge believes that they can make the law of the land.
Today they want to talk about the real emergency, which is the power of United States district courts to issue universal injunctions rather than just injunctions that apply to the specific parties in the case. It seems like a rather boutique and esoteric issue to raise in the middle of an economic catastrophe that they just foist upon America, but there's a method to the madness. You see, federal judges have issued at least 68 court orders that block or pause the administration's lawlessness to prevent irreparable harm in the country from his unconstitutional actions. The judges deciding here were appointed by 5 different presidents, both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, in 11 district courts across 7 circuits. The judges have explained in painstaking detail what is unlawful about Trump's executive orders and actions. Trump has offered no substantive critique of their legal reasoning, but he and Musk still want the judges impeached. They say they should be removed from office simply for striking down the president's illegal policies, which is odd given that Trump and his party demanded for 4 years that federal judges strike down President Biden's policies like student loan forgiveness or immigration policies or EPA action on climate change. They seem to embrace Marbury versus Madison and judicial review of Democratic presidential actions, but not of Republican actions. Well, they say that's because Trump just won an election. He beat Kamala Harris by 2 million votes. Well, guess what? Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by over 7 million votes. And that didn't stop them from suing to stop numerous Biden policies they thought were unlawful. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. It's the same now. Nearly 160 cases have been brought against Trump and Musk's actions. Trump's won some and he's lost some. But our colleagues protest that Trump is different because the courts have issued relief in at least 57 different cases, a record number of cases in American history at record speed. True. But if it seems like an incredible number of cases to lose in less than 100 days, recall that Trump is engaged in a record number of illegal actions at a breathtaking velocity never seen before in U.S. history.
Let me be absolutely clear. These sweeping injunctions represent judicial activism at the worst. And don't just take my word for it. As late as October of last year, the Solicitor General of the Biden administration urged the end of these practices, stating that, in fact, the Biden administration has to win every time. The opposition only has to win 1 out of even a dozen cases. That is exactly the problem we are facing. The Supreme Court regularly considers cases that are done in the ordinary course, where one district judge and perhaps a jury rules one way and another rules another way. And the courts, through the appellate process, come up with a single law of the land. But they do so looking at the arguments of both winning and losing, and they do so while the administration is not nationally and internationally banned. National injunctions are being used to halt executive actions and executive orders, not just for plaintiffs before the court, but across the entire country, including individuals and entities that are not even parties to the litigation and, in many cases, may not favor the outcome and would not have been willing plaintiffs. This undermines the system of government. It empowers individual unelected judges to dictate national policy and to thwart the Constitution, to take rights reserved to Congress and the President of the United States. NORA, the No Rogue Rulings Act, puts an end to this type of abuse. Under NORA, we reaffirm the principles that district court orders can only bind parties before the court and not non-parties across the country. This is not a partisan issue. It may be a timely issue for this president, but that does not make it partisan. To do the right thing at this time is critical, and I urge my colleagues to support the No Rogue Rulings Act and restore the constitutional balance and respect for separation of powers. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves, and the gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Issa, I rise in opposition to H.R. 1526. I heard the majority was bringing legislation forward to clean up a major policy crisis taking place within the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And that sounded pretty good to me because we're drowning in crises. The problem is that this bill does not address any of the real major policy crises of the first 100 days that Trump has caused for America. They are wasting our time with this bill by misdiagnosing and mislabeling the judicial response to these crises as a crisis itself. The whole country is reeling right now from the economic disaster Trump has plunged us into. He destroyed more than $10 trillion in American wealth in a single week, and then he went golfing and bragged to America about winning the tournament at his own golf course. That's like bragging about being endorsed by your own campaign manager. So much winning. The country can hardly stand how much winning Trump is doing for himself and Elon Musk and his billionaire cabinet. Perhaps he could have yelled "4" on the Greenway so tens of millions of Americans could have taken our retirement savings out of the stock market before he hit us in the head with a golf ball. Trump's ruinous tariffs have crushed our relationships with democratic allies and loyal trade partners like Canada, Mexico, the UK, Germany, France, while delicately carving out an exception for Trump's friends in the Home Office back in Russia. When asked why Putin uniquely escapes the wrath of Trump's global trade war, we're told it's because Trump doesn't want to interfere with the negotiations taking place between Russia and Ukraine for a ceasefire, an explanation that might have somewhat more force if Trump had not made sure that the tariffs do apply to Ukraine, as they do. The basis for this most imbecilic and destructive trade war in the history of the world is the profound economic research and policy writings of one Ron Vera, a completely fictional economist conjured up by Trump advisor Peter Navarro, a real person who Elon Musk just called, quote, a moron and dumb as a sack of bricks. Navarro's last name, delightfully, is an anagram for Ron Vera. You can try this yourself at home. Navarro turns into Ron Vera. Navarro figured that out himself, perhaps the greatest achievement of the Trump administration so far. What an enchanting and clever basis upon which to crash the economy of the United States of America. Well, despite the fact that Congress, not the president, has the power to regulate international commerce and legislate tariffs, our GOP colleagues don't even want to have one hearing on the breathtaking economic folly and wreckage of this fling into the abyss of trade war with the world. Much less do they want to do anything to reverse this policy nightmare for tens of millions of business people, farmers, workers, retirees, and consumers being throttled by this historic self-inflicted wound. No, today they want to talk about the real emergency, which is the power of United States district courts to issue universal injunctions rather than just injunctions that apply to the specific parties in the case. As of today, he's already issued 111 executive orders in less than 100 days. Biden issued 162 in all 4 years. Trump can issue as many as he wants, but he's got to make them constitutional, because if they're not, they're going to get struck down. And when Trump denounces the judges as radical left judges and lunatics who've gone rogue, like Judge Boasberg, he's just advertising his complete ignorance of the federal bench. Judge Boasberg is the chief judge of the U.S. District Court, first nominated to the bench by President George W. Bush, who was Justice Kavanaugh's roommate at Yale and a pillar of the conservative bar. We've impeached only 15 judges in U.S. history, always for serious misconduct like taking bribes, embezzlement, corruption, habitual drunkenness on the bench. Never because of a doctrinal disagreement. Never because of a judge's legal ruling. As Chief Justice Roberts said a few weeks ago, the proper response in our democracy to a judicial decision that you disagree with is to appeal the ruling, not impeach the judge. And Donald Trump has gotten some relief in some of his cases already. The system's working. We don't need to turn the whole world upside down to distract from the economic calamities they've brought upon us. And all of this would be fun and games, except the rhetorical assault by Trump and Musk and our colleagues against the judiciary has turned into something far more sinister in some quarters. Death threats, bomb threats, online intimidation and harassment of judges. These judges are currently targets of an onslaught of social media taunts and attacks that call for their exile to Gitmo, or label them a national security threat or traitors. Even worse, this campaign of vilification has spread to their families, including attacks on a federal judge's daughter who had her photo in place of work posted on a social media site by Elon Musk to his 290 million followers. These threats followed an actual bomb threat targeting the sister of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. It's a dangerous situation. Well, now our colleagues want to pass the No Rogue Rulings Act, which would effectively ban federal district courts from providing nationwide relief against unlawful actions by the administration. Litigants could request injunctive relief only with respect to themselves. So, for example, if the president establishes a church or bans newspapers or imposes martial law, each citizen in America would have to bring his or her own case, because the courts would not be able to rule to strike down unconstitutional action generally. That is patently absurd, and we're going to be able to explain how this legislation is a massive distraction from the issues that are really facing America. We reserve.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president.